Okay, so starting the solving, my job is to isolate the radical, isolate the exponent. In this problem, though, it's just like the square root method. We're just going to get x by itself. So I need to start moving the 2, the 1, and the 3, and you're just going to work backwards in the order of operations. Okay? So there's no addition, subtraction to move except for the stuff in the parentheses. So I'll get that at the end. So I don't have to do this step. But now I'm going to move the 2. Don't move it in, move it away. So I'm going to divide by 2. I'm going to get x minus 1 to the third power, and over here I'm going to get 8. And now, to get rid of the exponent, since they cubed it, I'm going to cube root. And I'm going to get x minus 1. And the cubed root of 8 is 2. It's not negative 2, it's just 2. When you take an odd root, it's just whatever the calculator says. And now to get x by itself, I'm just going to add 1 over, and I get 3. So how do I know if this really works? Just put 3 back in there. So if I put 3 into my problem, do I really get 16? So order of operations would tell me to do parentheses first, that's 2. And then I would do the exponent next. 2 cubed is 8. Then 8 times 2 is 16. And again, you can just type this into your calculator and you'll see that 16 is your answer, so this works. So no extraneous solutions here, this works. All right, next one, solve for x. Same type of problem, just slightly different numbers. Working backwards in the order of operations. There is the addition, subtraction in the parentheses, so we'll get rid of that last. I'm going to move the 2 away, not distribute it in. I'm going to divide by 2. So that gives me 16. Now to get rid of the fourth power, I'm going to fourth root. And just a reminder, fourth root on your calculator is where you have to type the 4 in first, then press the math button and choose the 5th option. And some of yours will look like this. Some will have a regular size 4 and there will be an X where that little 4 is, but it means the same thing. So my calculator is going to tell me 2, but what I'm going to have to remember, since I'm taking the even root, that it's not just 2, but it's also negative 2. So I'm going to have x minus 1 equaling 2 and x minus 1 equaling negative 2. So when I add 1 here, I get 3, and when I add 1 here, I get negative 1. Whoops. And then do these really work? Well, just put 3 in here. So I'm going to go into this box. And do I get 32? Order of operations, I get 2, and then 2 to the 4th power is 16, and 2 times 16 is 32. So yes, 3 works. And then negative 1. So negative 1 minus negative 1 is negative 2. And negative 2, make sure you type it in correctly, to the 4th power is 16. And when I'm done, yes, 32 equals 32. Okay? All right, next problem. So now we're getting to the radical problems, and this is where you just need to isolate the radical. So I need to make sure that this is by itself. So you essentially work backwards in the order of operations. First I'm going to add 5 over. And now to get rid of a 1/3, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, because that's going to become 3 over 3, which is 1, and that's how I'm just left with the cubed root of x minus 8. And then I'm going to multiply this side by 3, so I get 15. And now that I've isolated the radical, I'm going to get rid of the radical. So if they cube root it, I'm going to cube it. And those 3 basically cancel each other out, so I'm left with x minus 8. Then I'll cube 15, and I'll use my calculator for that. And I get this number. And now to get x by itself, I'm just going to add 8 over, and my answer is 3,383. So now I just want to see, does that really work? And again, I think it's faster to check it algebraically. So I'm just going to use my calculator, and I'm going to put that number in. I have a lot of room here. Okay, sorry, that's squished. So how do you type that in your calculator? First, I'll type in 1/3. I'll put it in parentheses. And then I'll get my cube root, so that's just math, and you choose the 4th option. And then some of you might have to start the parentheses depending on the operating system. I'll go ahead and do it. And I'm going to put 3383 minus 8. And then close the parentheses or use the right arrow and get out of the radical. And then minus 5. And do I get 0? I do. So when I'm done, I get 0. So this works. No extraneous solutions. All right, next one. First step is isolate the radical. It already is isolated. Next, get rid of the radical. So to undo a square root, I'm going to square this side, and I'm going to square this side. So this square gets rid of that square root, so you're just left with 2x plus 6. You do not get to distribute the squared because that plus is stopping you. Anything with addition or subtraction has picky rules, so it really means to multiply. And as you guys are starting to say as well, I have neighbors visiting neighbors. So I'm going to get x squared and 3x, and then 3 is going to visit, and I get 3x and 9, and when I'm done I have x squared plus 6x plus 9 on this side. And there's the other side. So now we're back to first semester. How do I solve this? Well, I have more than one type of x, so I'm going to get everything on one side, and I'm going to factor it. So I'm going to subtract the 2x over to the 6x, and that gives me 4x. And I'm going to subtract the 6 over to the 9, and that gives me 3. And then you can factor it. So factors of 3x squared, that give you 4x. Well, that's going to be 1x and 3x. And then you can rewrite it, or you can box it. If you box it, here's your box. Okay, so I'll continue with this way. I'm going to group them. And the first set, I can factor out an x and get an x plus 1 left, which is what I'll need here. I'm just going to write it below. And so I'm going to take a 3 out to get that x plus 1, and when I'm done, my parentheses are x plus 3 and x plus 1. But you're not done yet. You still need to ask yourself what makes those 0. So negative 3 and negative 1. So those are my solutions so far. So do they work? Well, to find out if they work, you're just going to plug them back in. So I'm running out of room. So I'm going to just grab another piece of paper. And first I'm going to put negative 3 in there, and does it work? So first I'm going to start with negative 3 in here. So on the right side I get 0. On this side I get negative 6, and negative 6 plus 6 is 0. And the square root of 0 is 0. So negative 3 works. That's the solution. So now I'm going to see if negative 1 works. So putting negative 1 in, wherever there's an x. So here I get negative 2, and negative 2 plus 6 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. And if I add this side up, I also get 2. So they both work. There are no extraneous solutions, so both count. And the last problem. I need to isolate the radical. This is like a radical. So they're just writing it as a rational exponent. So to isolate it, I'm going to divide by 3. And that's going to give me 16 over here. And now to get rid of the exponent, I'm going to use the exponent's reciprocal. And I'm going to take this to a 3/4 power, because this gives me an exponent of 12 over 12, which is 1. And then I don't need to write a first power. And then I'm going to do that over here. So you can type this into your calculator, but what you need to realize is that in the end you will be taking the 4th root of 16. And when you take an even root, you get 2 answers. So the 4th root of 16 is 2, but it's also negative 2. And then when I take that and I cube it, that's the next step, I'm going to get an 8 and a negative 8 out of that. So if you type it into your calculator, it will just give you 8. You're going to have to realize, did I take an even root? You did, so you should make it negative 8 as well. All right, so now I'm going to have 2 problems, x plus 1 with 8, x plus 1 with negative 8, and now I'm just going to subtract, and I'm going to get 7, and over here I'm going to get negative 9. And now I just want to see, do these really work? So I'm going to go back and check in the original problem. So first I'm going to try 7. So putting 7 in. And you can type this in. In the end, you'll be taking 8 to the 4/3 power, which just means you'll be taking the cubed root of 8, which is 2, and then taking that 2 to the 4th power and getting, oh, I can't even think anymore, 16, I believe, right? 16. And then bringing this 3 down, multiplying it to the 3 and getting 48. But again, you can just type this in exactly as you see it, and you'll see that you get 48 equals 48. So 7 is the solution that works. Good. Now we're going to try -9. So if I put -9 in there, and this one I'll just do on the calculator, do we get 48? So I'll do 3 in parentheses, -9 plus 1, exponent. Some of you need to put the exponent in parentheses. And I'm just going to hit enter. And I get 48. So yes, we get 48 equals 48. No extraneous solutions here. These both work. Okay? All right, now we're going to get into the ones that will have extraneous solutions. And you will have one question on the test that wants you to show this both ways. So this column is just where I'm going to solve. So for a 1/2 is just like a square root, so I'm supposed to isolate it, and it already is. Now I'm going to get rid of the exponent, and to get rid of a 1/2 power, I'm just going to square it. So on this side I get 9x minus 20, because it's to a first power now, and a first power you don't write. And now when I look at the problem, I have more than one type of x, so I'm going to bring everything over to one side so I can factor. You can also do the quadratic formula if you want. So factors of 20, x squared, that get you to -9x, and that will be a -5x and a -4x. And then you can rewrite it. Some of you know that there is a faster way to factor this. Or you could put this in a box, but I still have x squared, -9x, and 20. And then I'm going to group them. And now I'll go for my first set of parentheses. I can factor out an 8. And x times what gives me x squared is x, and x times what gives me the 5 is 5. And then I'll have my matching parentheses. And what times x gives me -4? It's a -4. And my parentheses are x minus 4, x minus 5. So my solutions at this point are 4 and 5. So now we're going to check algebraically, and we're going to check graphically. So algebraically, I'm going to make a column. And first I'm going to check x is 4. And I'm just going to let my calculator do the work. So I'll be typing this in just a moment. So I just put an x, the 4, wherever there was an x. So in parentheses, 9 times 4 minus 20. Take that all to a 1/2 power. I'm just going to do 0.5. And I get 4. So yes, 4 does equal 4. 4 works. And now I'm going to check 5. So I'm going to put 5 in this time. Alright, so in parentheses, 9 times 5 minus 20. Take it to a 1/2 power, and it works. So 5 equals 5. So how do you do this on your graphing calculator? Well, the way you do this is you're going to go over to your equation and maybe draw a line. And on the left side, you know, if you made x become -4 and you do your math, the right side will represent your y. You're supposed to get 4. So I need to make sure I can see the 0.44. And on the left, if x is 5, and I do the math, then on the right side, that'll represent my y coordinate. It should be 5. So I need to make sure that in my window, I can see 5, 5.